Is Deebo Samuel upset with the 49ers? We'll discuss that, take your calls, and answer some of your questions tonight on The Jack Hammer Show. Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Normally, when you tune in at this time, you get to see myself and Jesse Naylor for the Hammer and Nail Show. Unfortunately, tonight, Jesse is not feeling all that great, and so he is not able to join me. So I will be flying solo. So instead of it being the Hammer and Nail Show, tonight it's just the Jack Hammer Show. But what we're going to go through today is a couple of different things that have come up. Today, again, news about Deebo Samuel wiping the 49ers from his social media. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss the 49ers' newest addition to the wide receiver room. I'll answer some of your questions that you've sent in recently through Twitter. And then also, if you guys have some calls and you want to come call and talk, you guys can be my co-hosts. So if you have some 49ers related content that you want to discuss, bring it on and we can discuss that for a while here. I've got an hour for tonight's show lined up. So it'll be a good show and a lot of fun, I think, here. So, you know, this whole thing with Deebo Samuel, he wiped the 49ers yesterday. It was from his Instagram, I believe. Then today we have the word of it on, I think it was Twitter as well. This seems to be the newest way of players to show their displeasure with the organization when they're going through contract negotiations. We saw it earlier this year between Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. So is he upset with the 49ers? He could be. Or it could be a situation where, right now when players are realizing that when they make changes to their social media, everybody's checking it all the time. It's not like you or me or any of your friends. We make changes to our social media, nobody notices. A guy like Deebo Samuel or Trey Lance, so on and so forth. They make a change to their social media, and it creates a stir. Oh no, he took away. He put this picture up. He took this picture down. He did this. He did that. So, is there an issue with him? There could be. Here's what we know about the situation. As I said, Deebo Samuel took the information down. Took the 49ers pictures off of his social media. Deebo Samuel Deebo Samuel is going to be either a 49er next year, or he's probably going to be not making any money, because I don't see the 49ers moving on from Deebo Samuel right now. I don't see them making a trade of Deebo Samuel. I think if they did decide that they wanted to trade Samuel, that would be the worst move they've made since 2020 when they traded DeForest Buckner to the Colts. You finally have a all-pro level player. You pay those players. Your best players are the guys that you give that money to, and they have the ability to do that with the salary cap going up here in 2024. They can get by in 22 and 23 with these deals. There's plenty of ways that they can make this work. So just, if you're if you're someone who is worried about this situation, then there is reason to worry, because you don't know for sure if he's going to come back. And if you're someone who, like myself, doesn't really care and is just waiting it out to see what happens, because more likely than not, you would expect Samuel to be a member of the 49ers in 2022. It's not so much of a big deal. You just go about your business. So however you feel on that, that's your more than right to do that. Obviously, I just don't think that Samuel will get traded. And if he does, they need to get a whole lot more than just the 10th pick in the draft. They need to get multiple picks. It needs to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like what they traded away to get Trey Lance. It needs to be 3 firsts in a later round pick, something like that. So we'll see how it plays out. The other news that came down today with the 49ers that we did see was they added a wide receiver, Marcus Johnson. They added him to the roster. He played with the Titans last year. The 3 years before that, he was a member of the Indianapolis Colts, and he started out with the Philadelphia Eagles. He joined the Eagles as an undrafted free agent in 2016. Was on and off their practice squad that season, and then made his NFL debut in 2017. Johnson only has 51 receptions in his career. The interesting part about that is of those 51 receptions, 41 of those have gone for either a first down or a touchdown. So when he gets the ball in his hands, things are happening for his team. So this is an interesting addition. Good size, 6'1". He's about 207 pounds. When he was at Texas, the pro day at Texas, he ran a 4.38 in the 40. I believe he did 22 reps on the bench press, so he's got some strength there as well. He also returned kicks last year for Tennessee. It was only 9. 9 kicks. I think it was 170 something yards. He averaged just under 20 yards a return. So he has that ability in his bag as well. If the 49ers want to have him compete for a position, the return position, along with Ray McLeod, who I think has the inside track for that. But this is an interesting one. I think that Johnson has the ability to make this roster based off of his past history. He gives them an upgrade over what they had. I think he gives them an upgrade over what they had from a receiver perspective last year at that spot with Trent Sherfield. So that's Marcus Johnson right there. Like I said, 51 receptions in his career, 41 that went for a first down or a touchdown. Good pickup by the 49ers. We don't know the details of that yet in terms of what the cost was, but this appears to be a good move for San Francisco. All right, let's see what we've got. We've got a couple of people that called in, so we'll get to those first, and then I'll get to some of the questions that you guys had sent in a couple of days ago. We'll start off with Eric. Eric, how you doing?
Hey, Jack, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, I saw you on Twitter, and so I saw you pop up here, and it's good to see you.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little about the draft that's coming up. Obviously, the 49ers have a lot of picks, not necessarily in the first round, but after that, they got a lot of picks. And so I just want to talk a little bit about, my opinion, what I think they should do with those picks, what kind of, areas they should try to look to focus on. It's weird because when this regime first took over with Kyle and John, it felt like every year it would be a defensive lineman in the first round and a wide receiver in the second round. And it got to the point where I started to get a little sick of it. I was like, okay, guys, come on. We got to fill out the rest of the roster. Let's draft some offensive line, maybe take a cornerback, something like that. And now it's almost come full circle where now I look at the roster and I really think that 2 areas where they could really improve would be to add a deep threat wide receiver and an edge rusher to play opposite Bosa. So I just think it's interesting how it's come full circle. We drafted all these defensive linemen, all these wide receivers, and now I'm looking at the team and I'm like, what we could really use would be, an edge rusher to play opposite Bosa and a deep threat wide receiver.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I feel like they have a deep threat wide receiver on the roster already that just hasn't been getting the ball because the quarterback wouldn't throw the deep ball to him. And
Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, I think Brandon Ayuk is already that deep threat as far as their top line guy. They need to find one at the second, like a backup to Brandon Ayuk, I guess, in a way, because I feel like between we talked about Deebo Samuel to open up the show. Between Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Juwan Jennings, you have a really good threesome. You need to have it, but you need to have another guy behind that can also help take the top off. I don't know if Jennings is a guy who's going to be able to do that.
Do you think Ray McLeod could serve as a backup role? I mean, I know he got a little bit of production last year in the receiving game. He's mostly a special teams player, but just as a spot, fill in when necessary. Do you think he has that kind of top end speed to fill that role?
I think the use of McLeod would be more of like the way that you've used Deebo Samuel is more of a guy like out of the backfield, the underneath stuff. He's more of a slot guy. He doesn't quite have that. He hasn't been a downfield threat in his career.
Okay.
So I wouldn't expect to see that from him.
Because one of my concerns is that, and it's not really like a huge concern, but something that I've noticed, I think, is it seems to me that this offense was designed around Jimmy Garoppolo. You got a lot of guys who are good at yards after the catch. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo is not necessarily the best at stretching the field. So when you have a quarterback like that, if you can't throw the ball 50 yards, then you want to get receivers who can take a 10-yard out route and then add 40 yards after the catch. So I don't know. And Trey Lance seems to bring a different skill set to the table. So I wouldn't say that's a major concern, but it's something I've noticed. I do think that the offense was geared around Jimmy Garoppolo, not necessarily, obviously not necessarily Trey Lance's skill set. And I think, this draft in particular, it seems like some records were set at the combine for the amount of receivers who ran like sub 4.4 40s. So it's not just like one or two guys. I don't think that they need to trade up. I don't even know if they need to invest that second round pick. I think if they could go somewhere else in the second round, but maybe one of those third round picks, there might be a receiver available at that point who could, provide that for the team.
Well, I feel like, this is something that I've heard a lot where people have said that the offense was geared towards Garoppolo, everything with the underneath and everything like that. I don't think I think when you look at the 49ers offense, there are times when there aren't downfield shots that are available because of the route combinations, because Shanahan is calling something to the sticks, for example, on a third and 7, and he's got pretty much everybody running, 7 or 8 yard routes, and you see that at times on film. But there are also a number of times when you see guys open down the field and the quarterback just doesn't take that shot. And that's, I think, where I don't think the 49ers need to completely revamp their offense for Trey Lance. Personally, I feel like they need to come out and just run their offense that they've run over the last 5 years. And it's going to open up just because you have a quarterback that is willing to take that shot down the field and hit those receivers on the deeper routes, on those deep posts or the deep outs, deep corner routes and things like that, Jimmy Garoppolo either wasn't willing to pull the trigger on it because he didn't think he could get the ball there, or when he would try, he just didn't reach him.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And even sometimes you get a use check or one of the running backs like running a wheel route out of the backfield that could be open, you could potentially hit. And it seems like, Jimmy, more often than not, either doesn't see it or maybe necessarily, doesn't connect on the throw at that point. So, all right, so that's fair. So beyond wide receiver, I think to me it depends what happens with Jaquiski Tart and Alex Mack. I think depending on those, I think if either of those guys, if they don't come back, I think that creates an immediate need. I think Alex Mack specifically, even if he does come back, I'd still like to see them draft a center. Give him the Aaron Banks treatment, give him a year to develop, learn the offense, especially, center more than, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure more than any other position on the offensive line, they're the one that needs to understand the protection schemes and the terminology and all that. So that more than the others, you can't necessarily just plug and play a center. You kind of need them to have a firm grasp of the offense.
Yeah, no, center is a guy that the center, especially, that's somebody that needs to build. He's like your quarterback there, so he's got to be able to run the offensive line from that spot. So I agree with you. If they can get a guy in now and bring him along and have him be ready for 2023, that would be the best route to go if they're able to get Alex Mack back.
I think that this draft, it seems like it's set up well. It's not maybe as top heavy as some other drafts have been, especially at the quarterback position, but it seems like a very deep draft, especially at the positions the 49ers might be looking for, interior offensive line, safety, things of that nature. I'd like to see a safety with some ball skills. I know everyone, you look at the missed interception from Tart in the NFC Championship game. That was a huge momentum changer. But I would just in general, I would like someone in the secondary with some ball skills, because you have an excellent pass rush. You're going to force the opposing team's quarterback into some rush throws, some bad throws. And if you got a guy back in the secondary that could catch, you could turn some of those into turnovers. And, obviously everyone, who knows anything about football knows how important turnovers are. It's one of the biggest determining factors as to whether or not you're going to win the game. So,
Sure.
That's why I'm really excited, because they got the compensatory picks. Obviously, they gave up a lot, in the Trey Lance trade last year. But if you look at it, they ended up not the value that they gave up for Trey Lance has gone down since that happened. They obviously gave up the number 12 pick last year, which they were going to use that pick anyway. That 12 becomes 3, so that pick was going to be invested in the quarterback no matter what. They gave up the first and the third this year, which ended up, because they went to the NFC Championship game. Those ended up being at the end of those rounds. It ended up being the 29th pick in the first round. The third round pick that they gave up, they've now received 2 third-round picks as compensatory picks. So that mitigates a little bit. You know what I mean? So it seems like as time has gone on, the cost of the Trey Lance trade has gone down. And I really think those compensatory picks that they got are going to be crucial this year. Like I said, it seems like a really deep draft, and I don't see very many other holes on the team. I mean, I think there are a lot of positions that we can look at and we can say definitively they don't need to draft a quarterback. They don't need to draft a left tackle. I'd like to see an edge rusher play opposite Bosa, but you don't really need a number 1 edge rusher. You have Nick Bosa for that. You don't need a middle linebacker. You know what I mean? With the signing of Charvarius Ward, you don't necessarily need a number 1 cornerback. Especially, I really like Emmanuel Mosley. I think Mosley, especially now that he'll be able to be the number 2 cornerback on the roster, I think Mosley could be a number 1. And especially now that you got Ward on the roster and him as a number 2. So that's not really an area need. So to me, I think that half of the positions you can eliminate and say, like, listen, we don't even really need to, consider these positions. And that will allow them to focus on interior offensive line, possibly an edge rusher. And then the only other thing to consider would be, and the team would know this better than either of us, but the health of Javon Kinlaw. You might want to consider maybe one of those later round picks, maybe trying to invest in an interior defensive lineman just to mitigate the possibility that Kinlaw might have this might just be a perennial thing with Kinlaw. I don't know if it's just me, but one of the concerns I have when I look at Kinlaw, he just seems to be really top heavy. He just seems to be a large man. And it seems to me that this might be a recurring issue where his knees just can't support that kind of violent physical activity, getting off line of scrimmage, engaging the offensive lineman, the twisting and stuff that you do to try to get around the offensive lineman. I'm concerned that it might be a recurring health issue for him. I don't know if it's just necessarily because he missed the Senior Bowl before he was even drafted with a knee injury. So it might just be that his body shape doesn't, preclude itself to being healthy over a 17-game season, possibly playing 2, 3, maybe hopefully 4, playoff games, year in and year out. My concern is that his upper body is putting too much torque on his lower body, and those joints, I don't know like how the medical procedure works, but I know that cartilage doesn't grow back. So if you have joint problems, they usually, don't get better over time.
Yeah, no, and I think you hit on a lot of really good points because the 49ers, one of the things that they've done is they've put themselves in a really good spot going to the draft by really filling most of their needs. You talk about a need for a safety, you talk about a need at nickel corner, you talk about a need maybe at the edge, interior offensive line, all these different spots, and they already have guys that can fill those roles. So if they aren't able to hit on a big one, they have a guy that can fill the gap that they can then develop and that kind of thing. So they're not pigeonholed into going in any one direction. And that's one of the things that I really like about the way that they've gone about it. The Kinlaw thing is right. Kinlaw is a guy who he had knee injuries before joining the 49ers. They decided to take a risk on him anyway. They feel like it's gotten better. Is he going to be able to play and be at the level what they expected him to be when they took him with the 14th pick in the draft? That's one of the biggest questions facing the defensive line. And I do agree with you, though. I do feel like interior offensive line is a position that they need to invest in. I do feel like an edge rusher or a defensive lineman wouldn't be a bad idea for them in this draft because they don't have very many of those guys signed long term. And if you can lock somebody up so you're able to kind of build them up, that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I like Ebicom. See, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know. like, and especially if Mack and Tart come back, I don't like. Everyone has their own definition of what's a need. I don't know if there are any real like needs at that point. I mean, obviously there are positions you can upgrade from, but like in my opinion, a need is a position or a position group that is so far below average that it's going to end up becoming an Achilles heel. If you look at the Packers special teams last year, that was a need. They needed to upgrade that, and they didn't, and it ended up costing them a chance to advance in the playoffs. So I look at this team. So to me, a need is where you don't necessarily have a serviceable player on the roster. And I
Okay.
look at, maybe even if Tart doesn't come back, I think between Tarvarius Moore or Talanoa Hufanga, I think one of those guys could provide a serviceable fill in that position. I guess the only one that I would really go to where I don't see the replacement would be Alex Mack. But other than that, I think now you mentioned the wide receiver group. I like Juwan Jennings. I don't think it's a need that you have to upgrade at the number three wide receiver position. I just think that's an area where they could add a more dynamic element to the offense. But again, I think that they've done an excellent job constructing this roster, and I do think that there is depth where like if let's say they're not able to add or they decide not to add another pass rusher in the draft, I think that you can make it work with Ebukam. They brought back Arden Key. I think you can rotate those players. That way, the defensive linemen are fresh, and that's another position where I think that that they could get serviceable production. So yeah, I mean, I think that they could go into this draft with not necessarily having a lot of holes to fill, and just what areas on the roster are we looking to improve upon.
Yeah, well, and based off of the way that what you just mentioned right now, if you're looking at it and you're saying the need is a position where you're well below average, there's really nowhere on the 49ers that I think that you could say is a definite need. I feel like they're okay. I think their offensive line is going to be better than people are making them out to be. We already know they're very good in the backfield. They're good at wide receiver. They're good at tight end. Quarterback, they spent big last year to get the quarterback that should be taking them this year. We know they're pretty good up front on the defensive line. We're not sure about their run defense without DJ Jones, but the pass rush is going to be as good, or if not better, because they're bringing everybody back as the DJ Jones, and Jones had 2 sacks. Arden Key had 6.5, so that's a loss, but he's a guy who never done that before. So I think that's somebody that they can replace and probably
Oh
get that
yeah, okay.
productivity out
I
of.
said Arden Key earlier. I meant Carrie Hyder. They brought Carrie Hyder back. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you've got Carrie Hyder there. The linebacker group is one of the best in the NFL. You already mentioned it. The corner spot on the outside, they're good with Sanders. Oh, excuse me, not Sanders. With Emmanuel Mosley, Ward, and then the rookie Ambry Thomas.
Ambry Thomas, yeah.
That's three good players.
Yeah.
Thomas is a middle of the road guy at this point, but he can get better in his second year. You also have Diamondo Lenore, who's going to be more of an inside guy. I think slot, if there's a need, it might be slot because we haven't, and part of that is just because we haven't seen it be done with Diamondo Lenore.
Yeah.
But we have seen it be done. We have seen them play with Dante Johnson in the slot. And we've seen them be successful with Dante Johnson in the slot. So it's just the 49ers have put together a really good team, and there are things that we can nitpick about. But at the end of the day, I think this is still a pretty talented roster as it stands right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's always areas you can improve. I just think that, at this point, I don't see any glaring weaknesses. I don't see, like, there have been times where, last year I was a little concerned about the cornerback position. There have been times where I've looked at certain parts of the roster and I'm like, oh, that's going to be a problem at some point. This is going to be too much of a disadvantage. But the way I'm looking at the roster now is like, I don't know where the weakness is. It's difficult for me to say, like, what could stop this team from going all the way.
There's if you're looking at that, then the things that could stop this team from going all the way is if the offensive line does not produce at the level that we expect them to, given the changes that they've made up front. So if those changes don't work out, that could be a problem. On the defensive side, if they don't add a safety and Jaquaski Tart doesn't come back, does Talanoa Hufanga fill that role of Tart? Or is there a big drop off there that causes the secondary to struggle? Same thing in the slot. K'Wan Williams was a good run defender last year, but he wasn't very good in the pass coverage. And So, do those losses really hurt the 49ers? So we'll see how it all plays out. I think the 49ers last year were better than a 10-win team. When you have the quarterback situation like they did, and you have a coach who this back and forth thing that they were trying to do in the beginning of the year, I think it just took them a little while until things just got settled at that position. And then Deebo, then things took off from that point. Plus, they had to move Deebo into the backfield because they didn't have the explosiveness from the
that's
quarterback
one
position.
thing. If we're talking about like what could end up being a weakness, and I don't foresee this at all. I'm not predicting this, but just to be fair in terms of the possibilities, if Trey Lance isn't as good as Jimmy Garoppolo, which again I'm not predicting that. Don't say, hey, this guy is a Trey Lance hater, but that until we've seen Trey Lance do it over the course of a 17-game season, you're projecting what you expect him to be. But if he does have a little bit of struggles, because I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is basically his rookie year. I mean, he only started 2 games last year. This is gonna be his first full season of getting first team reps and being the starter, from the beginning. So that could end up being a weakness potentially if he's not as good as Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't expect that to happen, but just in terms of like what on the roster is unproven, what are the question marks at this point? Like you can't say that, Nick Bosa is a question mark. You can't say that Deebo, like the production you're going to get out of them. Until Trey Lance proves it, I think it's fair to say, until he proves it, I think it's fair to say that it's unproven.
Yeah.
So
I hear you. I'm gonna move on and take some of the. I got another guy on the line over here too, but I really appreciate you calling in. That was fun to talk to you.
All right, yeah, thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good night.
And you too.
All right. So that's Eric brought up a lot of good points, and we're going to go through some of them. And there's also, because there were some of the other questions that I was asked the other day that I wanted to bring up. But before we get along, Rich, thank you very much for the donation, $4.99. He says, I just want a stud O-lineman. I'm sick of Trent and the hopes and dreams line. I hear. And Rich, thank you for the donation. I know when I threw out the request for folks to call in and be a guest host tonight, you had said you'd be up for it, but you weren't sure if you could hang. Call in. Let's hear it. I don't have a problem. We'll put you on. It'll be fun. Don't worry. Nobody's gonna hurt you. But in terms of the O-line, I do hear you. Let's wait and see what happens. I feel like Aaron Banks is being shortchanged a little bit. They do need to upgrade eventually at center. I think when we go back and we look at this offensive line last year and the struggles that they had in the running game, a lot of that can be traced back to struggles in the middle, specifically at the center position with the center being able to hold his ground there. That being said, Mack was an upgrade from what they had the year before to an extent. Probably more in the passing game than in the running game though. Just going to go through some of the comments really quick. CJ, I see the one about Danny Gray at 61. I haven't looked at that name yet, so I will get into it. I'm starting to get into that into the draft quite a bit more recently, but I haven't seen everybody, so that's a name that I'll take a look at. There was another one that I was looking for. Apologize. You guys did a really good job with some of these questions. Moses asks, Jack, if Deebo gets traded, which I don't think he will, it will be an uprising from the fan base, just like what happened with Joe Montana when he got traded. Thoughts? Well, I agree. If the 49ers trade Deebo Samuel, if that's what the direction that they choose to go, there should be a little bit of an uprising from the fan base. This guy was really the heart and soul of their team last year. They don't make the playoffs without him. He's an all-pro. That's the whole reason that you draft and develop guys, is to get them to be that level. And so the 49ers don't need to be getting rid of their best players. And right now, Deebo Samuel is probably their best offensive player. Even with Trey Lance, I've seen people talk about, Trey Lance might make him, make Deebo Samuel not quite as necessary. I disagree. I think Trey Lance needs Deebo Samuel in order to succeed. He needs all the weapons around him that he can get. And a player like Deebo Samuel, who is one of the top 5 wide receivers in the league, maybe top 3, that's just, there's no way that you pass that up if you have him on your team. So I don't like that thought at all. That it'd be okay to move on. If the 49ers go that route, then yes, definitely they deserve to take the criticism that would come their way. Really quick, I'm going to throw this up. This is a question that I was asked this week on Twitter from 49er fan 57. He asked, as of now, what's your feeling on the position of the first pick at 61? Do you feel like the 49ers draft for need or best player available? And Eric hit on this one a little bit, is the 49ers, with the way that they've set themselves up, I feel like they're going to go for a combination of need and best player available, right? You're never going to take just whoever the top guy is on the board. If there's somebody there that you had listed as the 39th best player, and that's the top guy on the board, if that's an inside linebacker, you wouldn't take him because that's not a position of need. You're already pretty well set there between Fred Warner and Azeez Al-Shaair. You don't need to go that direction. Instead, you would look at a guy who fills the positions that you feel like you need to bolster the most. So for me, at this position, if they stick at 61, you're talking about value, and for that value that's there, when you look at the class that I'm seeing, is it's going to either be a safety or a cornerback. There's a number of interior offensive linemen that you can get in rounds 3 and 4 with those picks that they have in that range. So I would say, if you're going to go cornerback, safety, that's where you go, is at 61. Unless there is a pass rusher that falls to you at 61, you might go that direction there. Otherwise, it would be you're looking, I'd say, those interior offensive linemen that are most likely going to fall to the 49ers. Those guys are going to be around there in the 3rd and 4th round for them to pick up. So they can hold off a little bit there. So you might see a little bit more of a, quote, premium position there at 61. And I don't see them taking – I do see them going best player available based on their needs. And I'm saying needs just in terms of where I think that the position groups that they could bolster a little bit there. Hey, Jay, how you doing?
How are you, Jack?
I'm good. What's going on?
I just wanted to touch a little bit on Deebo. I think that he should get paid, but I think he should get paid probably a little less than the top 3 receivers, Adams and Hill. And I don't know what that price would be, but I think he should get paid a little bit less, just because he hasn't proven it, over 3, 4, 5 years. But I think the Niners have to take a very measured approach on how they handle it. And first of all, you want him to be happy. So you have to. It's a tricky situation, but if they come to a collective opinion on what he should get paid, and he accepts it, I think that's the best way. They have to put it into, like, you're valuable, we love you, we think you're part of the future going forward for years to come, but as well, it's a business, and hopefully Deebo doesn't get hurt. I think he understands it, or he should understand it. And that's kind of where I'm kind of standing on Deebo. But don't get me wrong, I love the guy, and I think he's a dynamic player. Nobody that we've seen in recent memory. I don't remember anybody. Maybe Percy Harvin a little bit, but Deebo's just a little bit more powerful than Percy Harvin. But that's kind of like my take on Deebo.
Yeah, and I think with a guy like Deebo, he's worth somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think his value is going to be somewhere in the 20. I haven't really changed it very much. I think based off of the deals we've seen signed, he's probably $24 to $25 million a year.
That's about right.
What he should be at. And I think I don't know what's going on in the negotiations. I can only assume that it might have something to do with guaranteed money or something like that. But the 49ers don't usually do re-signings early either. They're usually a team when, just based off their history, their re-signings come in August or late July. So, there'll be lots of talk. I remember last year, I believe it was, before Fred Warner signed his contract, I was speculating that there was a chance that they'd move on from him because you didn't know if they valued that inside linebacker position for, at a rate of $20 million a year. So I can understand the speculation around it. But at the end of the day, I think the 49ers will keep their guy because that's the smart move.
Yeah, and you have to keep your top players to have sustained success. I mean, I don't like them, but I respect the way the Steelers always are right there. They're no matter what in the AFC, even if like this past year, with the quarterback issues they had with Big Ben, with just him being older, but they're always there. They're always in the conversation, and if that's the long-term vision, I think that's the way to go because you can't get top players and then see that they're at an all-pro level and then let them go. Like that's no way to build it. I think you have to build it through keeping the core, and then surrounding them with players that make sense for the system, and then I just think that would be a mistake to let Deebo go.
Yeah, I agree. It would be a big mistake, and like we said, it's a possibility that they decide to do that. But if they go that route, it's a big mistake for the 49ers. So we'll see the direction that they take here soon.
And one last thing, and this is just off the Deebo thing, but it's just I was just thinking about it. If you were a GM, Jack, and you had to make a decision, would you take Baker or Jimmy?
If I had to take Baker or Jimmy, and I'm a GM right now, and I'm going to be making a trade for one of those players, I would probably go with Baker because he's healthy right now, and I know that I could sign him or trade for him, bring him in, and be able to have him go through the entire offseason program and everything, and then kind of build around him for a year or two as my bridge. I think I'd rather go that direction than Jimmy Garoppolo at this moment, just because he's injured.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just the injury really messed up Jimmy's value and how other teams perceive him. Well, Jack, I gotta go, but thank you very much for taking my call. I really appreciate it. I love your show, and I'll keep in touch with you guys whenever you're on. And you have a good weekend.
I will. You too. Thank you so much for calling. I always I appreciate you watching as much as you do and calling in. So you have a great weekend yourself, Jay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. That was a fun call with Jay. Really quick, there was a question over here, a super chat from James Foster. Thank you for the donation. He says, I'm surprised I have not heard any talk about trading up in the second round. With the third round picks and our second rounder, it is a possibility. And it is. It's definitely a possibility. The 49ers could move up, maybe use the second and one of their thirds to move up a few spots. That's a definite possibility. Just depends on who's there. That's one of the nice pieces about the way that their draft board is, even though they don't have a first round, the way that it's structured is they have the ability to go and pick guys that they want based off of whatever their criteria is. That's one of the questions actually that I was asked the other day was, here, I'll pull it up really quick and I'll get back to yours, James. Rollo Tomasi, who is over at always right, is a good over at the 49ers.press Democrat, all for inside the 49ers blog over there. He's a really good commenter over there. And he asked, do you think the 49ers use all 9 picks or do they trade up, consolidate to 4 to 5? I'm not sure there's room on the roster for 9 rookies. And I agree with that. And that's partly why your question there, James, really meshes up with there, because I don't think the 49ers have room on their roster for 9 rookies. You look at the way that it's currently constructed, they don't. 4 to 5 might be a little low on the low side, but I would say, I don't think there's more than 6 rookies that are going to make the team this year. I would expect to see some moves made. They probably end up with 7 or 6 picks at the end of the day when it all wraps up on day 3. Who knows? Maybe Jimmy Garoppolo gets traded as a draft and the 49ers end up with a first round pick through trading some of those other ones or whatever, or Jimmy Garoppolo gets traded and they end up with another second round pick that they can then, use the 2 second round pick. Who knows? There's all kinds of interesting things that could play out with this, and trading up there in the second round would definitely make sense. That's for sure. Let's see what else we had. If you guys make sure you hit that like button. I usually don't do a very good job of reminding you throughout the show, but if you could hit that like button. Tom brings up the question. He says, if they sign Teray, the D line would be at 11. No more room for any D line draft picks. I agree with the caller on ball skills. 5th in sacks, 26 interceptions last year is an issue. In terms of the D line, if they when I see somebody like Teray, if that is a player that they choose to bring in, what that tells me is that they're not sold on Samson Ebukam being the guy opposite of Nick Bosa, because they're very similar players. They're both linebackers turned into pass rushers. And the 49ers can move off of Samson Ebukam, get some cap savings. So maybe they go with a guy like Teray instead, who can kind of do those same similar things to Ebukam and lower the cap hit and the cost of doing that. So I think if they sign Teray, you'll see other moves as well within their picks. All right, so that's jump over to this one. Andrew says strong safety is a need. Hufanga better in the Marcel Harris role. I understand that because I've been there as well in terms of Marcel Harris being more of a box safety. And the one thing that I'll say about that is they used him on as a single high safety at times last year when they would go into like their three safety set, and they'd have Ward and Tart play up the line of scrimmage in the slot kind of thing, and then they would keep Hufanga back as the single high safety. He can do those kinds of things every once in a while. You don't really want him to be your single high safety. When you look at the way that they're, my thinking is that with Ward, you're going to be able to tighten up your coverage. You're not going to have 2 safeties be deep as much in pass coverage, which will allow Hufanga to be more of that box curl to flat defender in a cover 3 type of defense, playing man coverage out of your base set on a tight end or a running back, which is kind of what you're talking about in terms of that Marcel Harris role. But I think they might be able to get by with him a little bit. I would like to see them upgraded though, if possible. I'm not completely sold on him. Here's the other thing to think about when you're looking at the safety position. Jimmy Ward's entering the last year of his contract. With where he is right now, the 49ers could save about $6 to $8 million in cap hit this year by doing a new deal with Jimmy Ward, depending on the signing bonus that they give him. That deal hasn't happened yet, so we'll see. I think it will speak loudly if there is no deal for Jimmy Ward this year, what their direction is at safety, especially if they do choose a safety in the draft. So, like I said, there's been no movement around Jimmy Ward, and I would expect there to be something in there because of the way that they can save money with him. If he's a guy that they want around long term, it just makes so much sense. So let's keep something to keep an eye on there as well. Jimmy Ward. And then Jay, thank you for the donation. Says, appreciate your hard work and dedication to your craft. Always great info for the faithful. Keep it up. Thank you very much, Jay. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the donation quite a bit. And that's what it's all about. Just trying to, I've been around the 49ers since 1980 in one way or another. And I'm lucky as heck that I get to talk about them on a daily basis and write about them and cover the team. So it's my way of giving back a little bit. And I gotta say thank you to Grant as well. He was a big help with this, with me being able to even be in the position I am. Because without him, and the arguments we used to have when he was writing the Press Democrat, I probably wouldn't have gotten into writing the first time I did. And if he wasn't around, I definitely wouldn't have got into it when I did back in 2020 either. So a lot of thanks goes out to him. So if you don't like what I have to write, blame it on him. If you like what I do, then thank Grant for it as well. Let's see, what else have we got? There's a comment there that I liked really quick from James. He says, anyone surprised Tart hasn't signed anywhere else? No, I'm not surprised that Tart hasn't signed anywhere else. Remember, Tart's a guy who last year didn't sign until right before, I think it was in the middle of, it was late in free agency, and the 49ers were able to get him in for cheap because there just wasn't a whole lot of market for him. It makes sense that he is still out there right now. The safety market is slow moving. There are a number of safeties in the draft that people feel like can step in and play this year. So when you put those two things together, and then you add in the fact that Tart has been about as healthy as Jimmy Garoppolo throughout his career, it makes sense why he's not been signed yet. He's a really good player when he's on the field, makes a lot of good plays, but it's just he's not able to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing around Tart is his ability to stay healthy. Going back to some of the questions that I was asked, I went over the one about the draft position. Another one went over the one about the 9 picks. This is another one that I wanted to touch on, and I touched on it in a tweet that I sent out this morning. And it was, how much does Shanahan's game plan change to profit from a triple threat quarterback, meaning Trey Lance and his ability to run, throw deep, move in the pocket, and all those types of things. And really, I don't think that it needs to change a whole lot. I think the 49ers game plan should be pretty similar to what it's been for the last 5 years, with the exception of maybe moving the pocket a little bit more. When you go back and you look at the numbers, I know it's only 2.5 games, so it's limited. But Trey Lance as a scrambler is a pretty good runner. He averaged over 8 yards per scramble last year. I think it was 8.5. When the 49ers called a design to run with Trey Lance, not so much. 2.7 yards per attempt. And a lot of some of those were coming on quarterback draws and things like that. So the deal with Lance, playing a quarterback, let him be quarterback, let him move around, let him use his arm, let him just do the stuff that you've done, and let him take advantage of what's open in your playbook, because the playbook, there'll be maybe a few more shot plays that are called, but just throughout the when you watch the 49ers on film, you can see the routes that are deeper, and you can see the quarterback look and then pass them off to take an underneath route. That's what I'm talking about when you watch Jimmy Garoppolo and Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard and the other quarterbacks the 49ers have had over the last 5 years, with the exception of Trey Lance. You put Lance into the game, and now you see the ball start to go down the field. You see them take advantage of pass interference. You see them stress other areas of the field that they haven't been able to. And that's stuff that's just coming out of the natural progression of the play. And I would like to see that continue. I don't want to see Trey Lance used as a running back like they saw in week 5. We didn't see that in week 17 anyway. In that game against Houston, for the most part, he wasn't utilized in that manner. But they need to do a better job of just running their offense instead of having Lance be the guy when it comes to some of that stuff. Thomas, you come up with a good question. You asked, do we need to make a move at halfback to a 4.3 type burner? Feels like we have an explosive back. Deebo won't have as much stress on his body. Feel like if we have an explosive back, Deebo won't have as much stress on his body. Absolutely. And that's funny that you asked, because that was one of the questions that I was asked as well, and I was going to hit on anyway, is that kind of back would be helpful for the 49ers 100%. Last year, I think the reason that Deebo had to go back there was because they weren't getting those explosive plays out of the passing game. Everything was so rigid and such a struggle. When they did get an explosive play out of the passing game, it was usually because Garoppolo would hit somebody on a dig, 10 yards down the field or 15 yards down the field, or whatever, and then those guys would make it happen with their legs. The ball wasn't being thrown 45 yards down the field or 30 yards down the field even to open up those plays. And so with Lance, the need to have that explosion isn't going to have to come out of the running game. It can come out of the passing game, I think, a little bit more than it has. Uh, the other thing I'll say, since you asked about it, backs, you have a good back in Elijah Mitchell. We haven't really seen much of Trey Sermon, but there's been times with Trey Sermon when he's gotten in where you've been able to see some explosion from him, or some ability to turn, to get to the corner and get to the edge and things like that. There's it's here and there, it's hit or miss. It's not consistent. We know that about him. Lynch and Shanahan and even Mike McDaniel last year talked about it. But I feel like right now, if you look at the 49ers running back room, you have two guys that I think are for sures, and that's going to be Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon. I think they are for sure type guys. Jermichael Hasty and Jeff Wilson Jr. are a little bit more iffy. I think the 49ers are going to add somebody. They're not going to go into training camp with only four halfbacks on the roster. So I do think that there is going to be a running back that gets added, whether it's through the draft or as an undrafted free agent post draft. There will be somebody that's going to get picked up there. And Jay brings up a name here. He says Pierre Strong from South Dakota, 4'3", 40. Good hands, great hands. He says that's kind of that's the kind of back I'm thinking of, somebody along those lines that has that type of speed. Not sure if it's somebody that they're going to have to pick up in the draft or if he'd be available afterwards, but I do think you'll see them get added. And absolutely, in that first game, Shan was playing Trey like he was Ironhead Hayward. Absolutely, he was running draws and powers and all kinds of stuff with his quarterback, and that's why he wasn't available the following week. So that's a tough one. Let's see. Andrew says, Jack, who's your favorite 49ers writer to read? Me. I read all my own stuff. Nah, I read I've always, let's put it this way. I'm cheap. So I look at the ones that are not behind a paywall. That's who I follow. No, I've always liked a few. That's one of the things about the 49ers beat writers is pretty much everybody that's doing that has been there for a while. And it just depends on what your flavor is. They'll have different strengths, and all of them have good content. It's fun to pick and choose what you're doing. But like I said, for me, it's usually the ones that I don't have to pay for are the ones that I'm going to be checking out. Chardol, I see you. He says, when do you think Trey Lance is going to start? Week 1? That's when. Trey Lance will be the starting quarterback for the 49ers this season. So week 1, Trey Lance under center. Not sure who they're going to be playing, but it will be his team. No, as far as Deebo, he's gonna stay. Let's look at another one really quick. And there's a couple a little bit more of with a little bit more of a throwback feel that we'll hit as we're getting towards the end of the show here. We'll hit them real quick. The first one was from Anthony. Anthony asks, if Eddie D was still the owner, how many Super Bowls would the team have? So if Eddie DeBartolo never had to give up the team to his sister, how many Super Bowls would the team have? My answer is 5. Yeah, I know they had 5 when he left the team, and I don't think the number would be any different. And here's why. Eddie DeBartolo's greatest strength, outside of his ability to make his people feel seen and heard and cared for, was his ability or willingness to spend whatever it took to put the best team together that he could. And the NFL took that away from him in 1994 when they decided to implement the salary cap. In 1994, the 49ers were ahead of everybody else in the NFL by understanding that you could sign a player to more money than he was going to hit on the cap, knowing that they could push money to future years. They went all in. They got their Super Bowl. They finally overcame the Dallas Cowboys. the 49ers under Eddie DeBartolo never made it back to the Super Bowl. They actually only made it out of the divisional round one time after that under his ownership once the salary cap hit. In 95, 96, they lost in the divisional round. 97, they finally made it back to the championship game and lost to the Packers again. 98, they lost in the divisional round. 99, their luck really ran out. Steve Young got knocked out for the season in week 3. The 49ers all of a sudden, for the first time since 1981, were stuck going without a Hall of Fame quarterback. Really, like I said, for the first time since 1981. They had done it in little chunks at times when Joe Montana was injured early in his career. But then even like in 87, 88, when Montana would go down, it was Steve Young, who was a Hall of Famer, that would come in to back him up. So the one year that he didn't have a Hall of Fame quarterback leading his organization anymore, 1999, he finished 4-12, and he was not back after that. It shows you the importance of that position. It shows you the way that the league has changed. And so as far as Eddie DeBartolo, he did a lot of really good things for the 49ers, but I don't think he would have won a Super Bowl over the last 20 years either. And then the other question, which has a throwback theme to it, comes from Swan Song. He asks, if Ricky Watters had stayed a 49er, would we have one more Super Bowl win? And would he be in the Hall of Fame? So Ricky Watters, really good 49ers running back in the day, played with them until 1994, left the 49ers, went to Philadelphia, and then he finished up his career in Seattle. And the answer to this question is no. The 49ers would not have won one more Super Bowl if Ricky Watters had stayed with the 49ers. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, the Green Bay Packers just became a better football team than the 49ers. They were building through. They had a quarterback, but they had a defense. They'd found the quarterback, but they had a defense. They had picked up Reggie White, completely changed the way that team played. Reggie White was like, obviously he was a Hall of Fame player, top of his game, and that Packers defense was too much. And then you throw in what Brett Favre was doing on the offensive side of the ball, and the 49ers defense, because of the salary cap, because of what they did in 95, that's why Ricky Watters wasn't around, or 94. That's why Ricky Watters wasn't back in 95. They didn't have the money to do it. So they were scrapping to stay afloat. They were able to continue to make moves to stay competitive, but they could never get back over the top because they didn't have the defense to back it up. Steve Young had multiple years after 1994 where he probably was better than he was even in the 94 season, in which the team didn't get to the Super Bowl, in large part because the defense wasn't very good. The one year that I would disagree with myself on that would be, I think, 98. The 98 team had a chance. That was the year they finally beat Green Bay. They, I think, would have beaten Atlanta in the divisional round in Atlanta, except for Garrison Hurst broke his ankle, I believe it was, early in that game, and that cost them the whole thing. So when I look at this, and Ricky Watters also, the other reason, Ricky Watters was a better player, put up better numbers after he left San Francisco. Not saying he was a better player, but his numbers were better, in part because the ball wasn't being shared with Jerry Rice. During his time with the 49ers, Ricky Watters put up over 1,500 all-purpose yards once. After he left the 49ers, he did it 6 consecutive years. The only year that he didn't was his final year in the NFL in 2001. He got up to as high as 1,800. I don't think he qualifies for the Hall of Fame either way, but this is the guy, Ricky Watters, and this is no disrespect to Ricky Watters. I feel like Ricky Watters was really good with the 49ers. He also benefited during his time here having an offensive coordinator named Mike Shanahan, who knew how to get the best out of him, who used his ability as a wide receiver. If you remember, Ricky Waters was actually a wide receiver in college at Notre Dame until some things forced him to become a running back, and then that's how he became a running back there, and then eventually running back with the 49ers. So I feel like the Waters is not a Hall of Famer. If he stays in San Francisco, they don't win one more Super Bowl. And none of that is meant as a disrespect to Waters, because in a lot of ways, when I watch Deebo Samuel play, I see Ricky Waters. Deebo Samuel is a little bit more explosive than him, but that ability to catch and run, do all those things is what I see. So, really quick, Raphael shoots out. He says, "Like and subscribe, everyone," and that's it. 100%. If you could do me a big favor and like, subscribe, do all those fun things. That's going to be the show for tonight. I really appreciate everybody that took the time to call in. Those of you who took the time to comment, follow along, I really appreciate it. Hopefully next week, Jesse's going to be feeling better, and we'll get him back on here, and we'll get to episode 51 of the Hammer and Nail Show on Thursday night. But again, I really appreciate everybody joining. I will be back tomorrow with another show discussing all the latest news with the 49ers. Next week, have some big shows lined up already with some incredible guests. Like I said, Jesse should be back on Thursday night as well for the Hammer and Nail Show. In the meantime, everybody, have a great Thursday evening. Have a great Friday if I don't hear from you again, and a great weekend. Thank you so much. If you could please hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you know when we go live. And last but not least, get yourselves over to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. That's the Inside the 49ers blog where I do all of my writing. Put a new article up there today about the 49ers signing their new wide receiver, Marcus Johnson. So get over there, check it out. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll be back with you soon.